Can you go into PUFAs then? Because this is kind of their big pushback on that explanation about saturated fat as well. Look at the charts. They have charts showing like the increase in PUFA consumption shows an increase in these types of diseases. How do you respond to that?
Firstly, that's some of the most weakest data that you can present. That's called ecological. So
why is it weak?
What I find is interesting because it's unadjusted. So you can basically just go out and look at two different trends and show an association, right? If you go out and say in the last 100 years, PUFAs have increased and obesity's increased, therefore PUFAs must be causing obesity. There's so many other things that have also changed during that period. People are more sedentary. People are eating 60% of their calories from ultra-processed foods. Now, they may contain PUFAs, but that doesn't mean that PUFAs are inherently a problem.
It doesn't mean that's the PUFA
that's a food
in
matrix.
The processed food. Yeah,
right. There's so many different things in there.
Yeah.
And they're hyperpalatable, they're low protein, they're low water, they're low fiber, all of these different myriad of characteristics that can lead to overconsumption. I kind of look at that ecological association, and mind you, what is left out there often is that PUFAs have gone up since 1960. Cardiovascular disease mortality has halved since 1960. They're inverse. So I could sit here and create the same argument and say, we've increased PUFAs dramatically since 1960 and less people are dying of cardiovascular disease. I think it's a pretty weak argument. I wouldn't really make it. But that's the same kind of logic.
So for anyone too saying, like, what is a PUFA?
PUFA is a polyunsaturated fat. So there's essentially high level. There's 4 different types of fats: saturated fats, trans fats, monounsaturated fats with that double bond, polyunsaturated fats with 2 or more. The foods that are richest in polyunsaturated fats are fatty fish, your walnuts, chia seeds, flax seeds, these types of foods. And then monounsaturated fats are rich in like avocados and olive oil. Saturated fats tend to be richest in animal foods, but not exclusively. So there are some plant foods like coconut oil and palm oil, which are the 2 tropical oils that are rich in saturated fat. The claims around polyunsaturated fats that I've seen are that people say they increase inflammation, and people say that they're obesogenic, they increase body weight, and that they increase risk of cardiovascular disease. Now, we've just spoken to the clinical studies that contradict the cardiovascular disease point. I think the most compelling evidence that we have that we can look at here for just polyunsaturated fats in general, and if people need to be worried about them, do we need to fear them? Right. I'm not paid by big polyunsaturated fat.
Yeah.
I could quite easily have low polyunsaturated fats and eat monounsaturated fats. But the evidence suggests if you're limiting polyunsaturated fats in your diet, you're leaving health on the table.
Which is so contradictory to this world of eating and what they advocate for. It's like PUFAs are the worst, especially specifically seed oils.
Right.
Like
but a lot of that's
oil.
Also the naturalistic fallacy. It's how they're produced. They'll show videos of the production and say, look, this can't be healthy. And, I think that's interesting. But I think, again, you have to go and look at the evidence that we have. And we have really solid evidence that shows, and it's not just observational evidence where you do a dietary assessment and then look at outcomes. The neat thing with polyunsaturated fats is that they're essential. Our body doesn't make them. So when you measure them in circulation or in tissues, what does that mean? That means they must have come in through your diet.
Like as opposed to saturated fats.
Right. So you can...
That our body makes. For anyone who doesn't know that our body makes.
Yeah, so our body can make saturated fats. There are studies, large population studies, where they not only do a dietary assessment, they actually measure. They do either serum, so looking at circulation, or adipose tissue, looking at the actual levels of linoleic acid, which is an omega-6, so it's a type of polyunsaturated fat. It is the polyunsaturated fat that is most rich in seed oils, right? So in these studies with tens and tens of thousands of people, they go and measure how much linoleic acid, omega-6, is in their fat tissue and is in circulation. And then they look at, okay, based on the variance in these levels, is there a difference in health outcomes? Do the people that have more linoleic acid in their fat stored in their body, do they have an increase in certain diseases? Are they living longer? Are they living shorter? What do you see? you see people that have more linoleic acid, these polyunsaturated fats, in their tissues, this is in their body, okay? They have lower risk of cardiovascular disease. They have lower risk of dying from cardiovascular disease, and they have lower risk of total mortality, which means death from all causes. These people with more linoleic acid, and I'll link to this study because if anyone is of the view that polyunsaturated fats are harmful, you have to read this paper. There's multiple papers. I'll give you a couple of them. People that have more linoleic acid in their tissue have lower total mortality. They're living longer. So
wow.
I look at that data and I find it very hard to take the position that polyunsaturated fats are harmful and that we need to avoid them.
What about the difference, though, between like a whole walnut versus canola oil, right? Are many of the studies understanding the difference there? Are they looking at the difference?
There are some studies that have attempted to look at the difference between oils and whole foods like olive oil and nuts. And, generally, my view, I think the whole food is probably better. And I say that mostly because you're getting slightly better nutrition, but also from a satiety point of view. Oils are very calorie dense. So if someone's goal is to lose weight, lowering the calorie density of the diet is a good thing. But at the same time, I wouldn't generate fear over oils at all. If someone's cooking with those oils in their diet and it's a healthy body weight and they're not gaining weight, then it's a way better option than butter.
Than cooking it with butter.
Right.
That's super interesting.
Which is now, ironically, is being marketed as a superfood again.
Yeah, butter is a superfood now, guys. It's back and forth, back and forth. You just never know what it is. But you feel like the science is pretty clear that it's one.
And it's not really back or forth. Like if we go back to where I kind of begun with saturated fat, the reason that you'll see different views out there is people are not considering the context. What is the dose of saturated fat? What type of saturated fat? What's it being compared to? And who are the people in the study? And if you don't consider that context, you can get easily confused on this topic.
Mm-hmm. And so when it comes to processed food, ultra-processed foods, then oil is a component. Those processed oils like canola oil and different seed oils, they are a component of the ultra-processed food. So what is it that makes ultra-processed foods unhealthy? Is it just the fact that they're calorie dense and low in nutrients, or is it more than that? Could it be that it's the fact that it's isolated foods like processed sugar and oils and lack of fiber and low in nutrients, all of that?
It's an answer that is still up for debate. Right, people are still looking at it. But I mean, if you think about it just generally, we know that they're hyperpalatable and they lead to excessive calorie consumption. And we know that energy toxicity is really damaging. I think that it's a twofold kind of problem here. One is that these foods they're low fiber, they're low water, they're usually low protein, they're calorie dense. All of these things leads to overconsumption. Right, they're not great from a satiety point of view, filling you up on fewer calories.
Yeah,
and
less nutrients.
The other thing is, what's the opportunity cost? When you're eating these foods, what are you not eating? Other foods that have inherent benefits that come with a lot of nutrition, fruits and vegetables and legumes, these types of foods are being pushed out of the diet. So I think you see the net effect on health is a summation of those two things.
Yes, I think that's a missing component people are often thinking about. Like if I'm eating this ultra processed food every single day, for every snack every day or every lunch, then you're missing the opportunity to eat whole plant foods with lots of vegetables and fresh fruits and nutrient dense calories.